Namaskar. We are here at the sidelines of the Jaipur Dialogues. There was this discussion about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is often quoted both by Dr. Shashi Tharoor and also by the proponents of Vedanta, Sankhya, and Siddhant. So, we had a brief disagreement. I have Dr. Ananda Ranganathan with me, and Dr. Anand Ranganathan had a different take on this shlok, the origins of it, the explanations of it, and the variations that we have in our different, I would not call them shastras, but the various uh, upakhyan and what is called the general educational teachings of ancient India. Welcome,
Thank
Dr.
you very much.
Ranganathan.
Thanks very much, Sanjay. So I think, and thank you very much for hosting this wonderful conference. Yeah, I think I think it was about a week ago or something like that this topic came up, and I have for long been an advocate of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but I think before we get into the details of the origins of this phrase in whichever shastras it occurs, I'd like you to know, because you have been expounding in great detail about the geopolitical scenario of the country as well as the foreign policy aspects of it. So I'd like to ask you whether do you believe that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which essentially means the world is one family, do you think that phrase that has been often quoted by Prime Minister Modi, it is also at the entrance of our parliament when, as you know, when Barack Obama came and in his speech, he said that this is a country that believes in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Do you, as an advocate or someone, a proponent of foreign policy who worked on detail, do you believe that this is an apt phrase to be followed for India?
You see, Anand, anything that we follow should have a context. So, for instance, if I am sitting in a classroom of class 6 and somebody starts teaching me advanced physics, it has absolutely no context for me, I cannot understand. Similarly, this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is often talked very loosely on every side. You can hear this being bandied about in different contexts without people even understanding, without even people knowing the origins, at least you know where it first occurs. But I would stick my neck out and say that 99% of the people who utter Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam do not even know where the origin is. The origin of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as you rightly said, is in Mahopanishad. Now, Upanishad is a part of Vedanta, we know. The Vedanta is the highest form of what is described in Sankhya as Paravidya. We just had a session where Swami Samvit Somagiri was talking about Paravidya and Aparavidya. The Paravidya, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, all these things that relate to the highest level of consciousness is called Paravidya in Sankhya. I think you definitely know that we have 6 essential orthodox systems of Indian philosophy, and we have 3 what is called heterodox. They are called heterodox only because they do not go by the authority of the Vedas, that's all. Otherwise, the essentials are more or less the same. And one of them is Charvak. The difference in all of these is that out of the 6 pramana systems, the systems of proof that the Indian philosophy has, every one of them, 6 plus 3, orthodox plus heterodox, there's only one pramana that all of them accept, and that is Pratyaksha Pramana. This was discussed in yesterday's session on science. So this Paravidya is what is called Brahma Vidya in Ved. It is called Vedant, Paravidya in Sankhya, and it is also the highest goal of Patanjali Yoga, which is Samadhi. In fact, I've dealt the Patanjali Yoga concepts, the four higher concepts of yoga. This is Ashtanga Yoga. And the first four, which we generally know and we loosely talk of them as yoga, are basically preparations. Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam are preparations to the higher form of yoga, which is described in the second shloka of Patanjali Yoga as Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So Mahopanishad is written in that context. The context is totally different. I will tell you the story that starts with Mahopanishad. In fact, Mahopanishad, the first chapter describes the manifestation of Narayan. It is something similar to the 11th Adhyaya of Bhagavad Gita, where the Virat Sarup is the Virat Roop is described. Then, in that very context, the manifestations of the Supreme or Brahma. Then the story goes like this, that Shukadevji is the one who actually narrated the Bhagavad Puran. So Shukadevji is looking for knowledge, and he is told that you have to go to Raja Janak. And he is a little intrigued. Why do you have to go to a king to learn about Brahma Vidya? How can a king teach me Brahma Vidya? But he is insisted upon. He says that no, you have to go to Raja Janak to learn this Vidya. Vidya, as Swami Somgiri was just saying, Vidya that teaches liberation. That is the concept of Vidya. And Raja Shukadevji goes to Raja Janak to learn this Vidya, and that is how the Mahopanishad flows, and it is in that context that this shlok comes up. So the context is Brahma Vidya. Now, when it is elaborated in Hitopadesh, so actually what it is trying to tell you, that a concept which in Vedanta is being explained to you to reach to your highest consciousness and go beyond it, as Adi Shankar has explained, Mano Buddhi Hankara Chittani Naham, that shlok, Shivoham, Shivoham. So these four levels, Man, Buddhi, Ahankar, Chitta, this is very much part of Vedanta. This is what Mahopanishad is a part of. But you can relate them to all the other philosophical streams of Indian philosophy, even to Buddhism, because it doesn't have the authority of Vedas, so even Buddhism would accept this. Buddhism has this problem of not taking the authority of the Vedas. So it is in this context that it is first talked about, and Hitopadesh sets it right. What it is telling, that what is at the level of Chitta, what is at the level of highest consciousness, and what is your attempting and your goal and your aspiration is at that level. It doesn't work in your everyday behavior, because if you get it down to your everyday behavior, it would result in a disaster. So you have to make that distinction. So at the level of intellect, you have what is called ahankar, or the sense of identity. And the sense of identity, we know now by scientific experiments, you are in that field, you would know that the sense of identity is very much present even in the animals. And the manas, the sensory perception, is very much present in the plants. What distinguishes human beings from plants and animals is intellect. because you can exercise intellect freely. And all the Brahma Vidya, all the consciousness teaching, all the great philosophies of India, they say that you have the intellect in order to go beyond your sense of identity, reach the highest consciousness, and then go beyond. So when we talk of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam in the temporal context, without giving it the actual context which is there in Mahopanishad, it creates that problem. It becomes problematic.
Very beautifully explained. Very beautifully. Now, so let me ask you a question which is related to that, which is that away from the context, let us remove the context temporarily, just for the subject of this discussion. Do you believe that this phrase, the world is a family, makes much sense today? Do you believe that away from the context of attaining what was the subject in the Mahopanishad, do you believe that this carries any depth and it should be followed as far as our relations with other countries are concerned? Do we as an Indians, should we believe that world is a family?
No.
We shouldn't. Okay.
I'll again explain it. Because if we are existing at the level of identities and we haven't transcended our identities, then whoever practices it will be completely disarmed and will be run over. Because this cannot be a one-way traffic in this world of identities. You as Indians may say that, okay, we have this lofty principle and it comes from our ancient teachings. But what happens? What happened to Buddhism? In Gandhar, how much time did Islam take to run over Buddhism in Gandhar? In fact, even semi-Abrahamic faith like Zoroastrianism was run over in a matter of 20 years. Buddhism was run over in a matter of 15 years. All the great Egyptian, Greek civilizations were all run over. It is only in this civilization because we knew the correct context of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And that has been taught to us by Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is absolutely clear. There is no confusion. Klaivyam masmagamah partha naitattopapadyate Shudram hridaya daurvalyam tyaktotishta parant. Get up. And as I think again it was discussed in Gita, he explains it beautifully. He starts off by appealing to his Swadharma, takes it higher, and in the end, in fact, the first thing that he tells him, Atha chet imam dharmam sangramam na karishyasi tatah swadharmam kirtim hitva papamavapsasi. That you will lose your swadharma, you will lose your kirti. These are not very high-sounding concepts. He's just telling it to a general mortal. Look, this is your swadharma, this is your duty as a Kshatriya. But if you go up, then you keep going into higher and higher consciousness. He takes Arjun to the highest level of consciousness. And after that, he asks him. That's again the most beautiful part of Gita, which I like the most. That in the end, he tells Arjun, Yathechasi tatha kuru. I have told you everything. Now you choose what you want to do. And then Arjun is so overwhelmed, he just looks at him, holds his hand, and then he says, okay, just do what I tell you. I will guide you through.
So it is a principle that is worth following, except that one has to be careful of not following it under all circumstances. I mean, it is a noble concept, even away from the context. To believe that world is one family, I'm just saying, it's quite appealing, but it should not be adhered to under all circumstances. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I would say that it is an aspirational concept.
Yeah.
that could be an aspiration, but then it has to be a global
It has to be a
aspiration.
global aspiration, yeah.
It cannot be just my aspiration that I would say that, okay,
I
for
believe
me,
this, yeah, but
the world is a family. Then what happens?
yeah,
That Hitopadesh tells you what happens if you treat
yeah.
the world as a family, but the other man doesn't. That is the story of
Yes,
Hitopadesh.
exactly. So, can I take, just as a winding up, a couple of queries that I have regarding this, if I may, specifically related to our foreign policy, and like your input on that. So, as you know, in the 50s, South Africa was one of the top 10 biggest economies of the world, but they were following apartheid, and we were amongst the first nations to say we will have no dealings with South Africa at all, because our fraternity are the people who are subjugated, who are the blacks of South Africa, at the detriment of our financial dealings with it. And if you know, of course, you know that UK and America kept on dealing with, economically with South Africa. These are the people who now preach about human rights and, how equal rights. These are the ones who were actually dealing with South Africa until the 70s and the 80s. So the first question is, did we do the right thing by believing that we are going to do the right thing because we are standing up for people who are subjugated, even if it is at the cost of our financial detriment?
Okay, as far as human rights is concerned, it's not the US and UK anymore. It is Saudi Arabia and Jordan which run
Yes, that's
the
true.
human rights.
Yeah.
The entire human
Yeah.
rights have been taken up by those who have the worst record of human rights in their own backyards. As far as the foreign policy of 50s is concerned, I, first of all, I do not think that we were very pragmatic at that point of time, because foreign policy cannot be practiced using Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Foreign policy, ultimately, you have to define your national interests and you have to pursue those national interests by what is described in Mahabharata as Sam Dam Danda Bhed. There's a beautiful shlok in Mahabharata. The context again is important because the context is Parshuram challenging Bhishma. And the reason is that he wants Bhishma to marry Amba. I don't think we need to go back to the Amba, Ambika, Ambalika story. Briefly, he says that you are responsible for her plight, so you must marry her. And Bhishma cites his vow and he says that I am open to anything that you order me, Maharshi. But this is something that I cannot obey. And there is a war of words, and ultimately it comes to a battle where Bhishma has to fight Parashuram. So, how Bhishma justifies it? How Bhishma justifies that battle with one of the 10 avatars? And he says, Yo yatha pravarte yasmin tasmin neva pravartaye. Someone, let me translate it another way. Give unto the other what he is giving you. Behave with the other person how he is behaving with you. So, if you make ideals instead of national interests as your foreign policy, then you're bound to falter. As far as the South Africa thing is concerned, I don't think that it was very idealistic as such, because those were the days of Cold War and we were more in the camp of the communist Soviet Russia. And that was a policy that would help the Soviet bloc and that would be appreciated by the Soviet bloc. The first people to declare South Africa persona non grata were all from the Soviet bloc, and India was one of them. I mean, it's idle for us to pretend that we were non-aligned. Non-alignment
another-
was just
yeah.
just another term
course, yeah.
for being Soviet bloc sympathizers.
Yes, yeah. And I think another, perhaps a pertinent example would be our relationship with China. Now, much to that detriment, we gave asylum to the Dalai Lama. He ran from China or from Tibet, and much to China's ire, much to the detriment of our at that point of time economic, financial, cultural relations, we gave asylum. Do you think that was the right thing to do?
I would take it a little further back, because our relationship with China is a classic example of one-way Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Yeah.
If you recall, you certainly do, because I think you probably quoted from it, I have read it, Sardar Patel's letter to Nehru just before his death. He clearly saw what was going to happen.
Not only that, Dr. Ambedkar as well.
Dr. Ambedkar as well.
He resigned from the cabinet as one of the 4 reasons was, Nehru's mollycoddling of China, batting for China.
And if it goes to the extent, of course it is not 100% verified, but we do see John Foster Dulles quoted here and there that he would prefer India to be as a member of as a permanent member of the United Nations.
Correct. Yeah.
For us to not pursue that, I would not go as far as to say that Nehru actually said make it China, because I do not see any credible information on that. But for us not to pursue that lead, I would say, was another example of a misguided Vasudhaiva
A
Kutumbakam.
pseudo Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Pseudo Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
Yeah. So, thanks very much, Sanjay, for elucidating that. It's been very illuminating. I think the context is, of course, very important, and the way you have very clearly, with crystal clarity, demarcated that the context of the Maha Upanishad and the context that came later on, how that determines the, if I can put it, applicability of this phrase Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anand.
Thank you.